name is Bay. This is Esther,
Champagne, Juliet.
and Esther and I, we are going to talk about hearing loss and deafness. For students to receive services as deaf or hard of hearing through IDEA, they would need to go through a formal procedure. The main concern is to students' capabilities and limitations relates to hearing, and audiological evaluation is a series of hearing tests. It determines the degree of hearing loss, type of hearing loss, and the configuration of the hearing loss. Another assessment is the multidisciplinary team. They look at they look at the overall health of the student. They also administer an intellectual test which determines whether the student is achieving at an expected level. With all the information gathered about the student, this will decide whether the hearing loss constitutes a disability that requires special education services. For cognitive research on cognitive skills of individuals who were deaf or hard of hearing, we found them to lag behind their hearing peers.
In terms of academic, children who do not acquire age-appropriate language skills face both immediate challenges in being able to communicate with others as well as long-term struggles to acquire information. Children who are deaf or hard of hearing have issues in reading, mathematics, and written language. Issue with reading is that children who are deaf or hard of hearing usually use ASL as their main language, and reading is in print, so they have a hard time reading written language because it's not their first language. In terms of mathematics, children who are deaf or hard of hearing have memory issues, and they don't always remember. They have a hard time remembering formulas and formulas.
Okay, so social emotional. The manner in which each of us understands others and our cultures and ourselves is strongly influenced by direct interaction as well as incidental. For example, fewer interaction as well as exposure to social and emotional language can damage their overall ability to function. Behavior, children and youth have to consider alternative behavior in social situations. Students who are deaf or hard of hearing often lag behind their peers. The reason for this behavior is part because they are less likely to receive or overhear explanations.
Perspective of parents and families. When a hearing parent learns that their child has a hearing loss, they usually experience a range of reactions and emotions and face a variety of challenges, such as understanding the impact of a hearing loss, finding appropriate services and support, and developing communication strategies. The parents must also choose either to learn and use ASL or to use amplification, optimizing residual hearing, and speak directly to the child. Many parents who are deaf and hard of hearing themselves will prefer to have a child who is also deaf and hard of hearing. These parents are able to communicate with their children directly, and the child is able to access incidental interactions that occur among family members because ASL is being used around them. Recommended educational practices for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Many students who are deaf and hard of hearing have limited and or delayed receptive and expressive vocabulary, and this negatively affects their comprehension. The use of pre- and post-teaching activities are a great supplement to daily lessons and are helpful. Pre-teaching is when students are taught before the lesson the main points of the lesson. Like if there are any new points that they're going to learn in the lesson, they're taught before the lesson. Post-teaching is when students, once again, is pulled aside and they go over what was taught in the lesson. The experiential ladder of learning is also a great tool to use when planning lessons for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. The steps go from concrete to more abstract. An Example of concrete strategies would be like direct experiences, tangible materials, photographs, and charts. An example of abstract would be lectures and discussions. One technology that is used in the classroom is a C-print. A C-print is a computer-aided speech-to-print transcription system developed as a classroom support. A typist called the C-print captures, types the teacher's lectures as well as students' comments into a laptop computer, and the typed information is displayed on a second computer that the student who is deaf or hard of hearing has. One downside of this, though, is that there is a delayed, when the teacher, so to speak, is a 3-minute delay, so the student may not get information right away. And also, it does not pick up on materials that are being used, visual aids, and like facial expressions.
Moving along.
So I will be talking about blind and visually impaired students and what education is like for them and what they experience. And so will Julia. So I will just start out by saying that the formal definition established by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, formal definition of blind visually impaired is an impairment of vision even when corrective lenses are used. The impairment inversely affects the child's educational performance. And that's very important because educational performance is the whole reason why the IDEA was started and how to help students with disabilities. There are two particular terms for blindness and low vision students. Low vision students they have difficulties with accomplishing typical visual tasks, so they can't see different varying levels of print text, so they usually have bigger print. They use bigger prints in order to learn and be educated in the classroom. Blindness means that the child has no vision or it can only see light perception, and light perception is just varying degrees of light and how it is filtered into the eye. So they can see whether they're in a bright room or if they are in a darker room. Congenial, there are two different types of visual impairment in terms of when the child develops a visual impairment. Is congenial visual impairment where it was present at the time of birth, or adventitious visual impairment where the condition developed at a later period of time, usually within the childhood, or if it developed due to an injury in later in life or something like that, but it didn't happen at birth. Usually, parents or teachers do the initial referral for visually impaired students, and parents the way that children are deemed eligible to get visually impaired services is that they go to an ophthalmologist or an optometrist. An ophthalmologist is a physician, and an optometrist is like when you go to the eyeglass store and they have someone who looks at the eye and can tell whether you have problems with your vision or what type of problems you have with your vision. So they identify the eye problems, they identify if corrective lenses can be used, and they identify if corrective lenses cannot be used. Also, if the child is being referred by a teacher, and it happened in the adventitious stage, which is when the child developed a vision impairment at a later date in their life, usually classroom performance will be an indicator as to how the child is doing and whether they should be referred to get visually impaired services. So if the child is in the front of the room and they still cannot see, then that would be a precursor to get visually impaired services. There are two types of assessments in which the child will have to go through in order to get visually impaired services. One is the functional vision assessment, which is when children with low vision, they go through this assessment, it's directly diagnosed into learning how the child uses their vision effectively and efficiently, how efficient they are. A visually impaired specialist observes basic vision skills that the child has by seeing how the child can track an item, how the child shifts his or her attention, and how the child can reach for objects. And whether the child uses, how they also use their vision up close, so can they see this piece of paper from this angle, or do they have to it has to be up close for them in order to see. The other assessment would be the learning media assessment, and this assessment is how the child overall approaches to using their other senses in order to learn. So how would they use their tactile senses? How, do they touch different objects, and are they learning through that way, or are they listening? And that would be their auditory senses, even their visual senses. And their visual sense, can they use that in order to learn? Functional characteristics or clinical criteria, or both, need to be satisfied in order for the child to be deemed eligible at the end of the day. So when a child does go in front of an assessment team, there's an assessment team that the child needs to go in front of, and the visually impaired specialist will be part of that team, even be the coordinator of that team, and will deem what services the child needs and how that child can be better helped at the end of the day. Cognitive characteristics of blind and visually impaired students. Blind and visually impaired students are directly influence. This disability directly influences the development and learning of the child who has it. And the basic limitations would include range of variety and experiences. So the child experiences gain through touch and hearing, and it does touch and hearing compensate for their vision loss. But it doesn't holistically help them, because sometimes you need vision in order to pick up on social cues and to view size, color, depth perception. And if something is too big or too abstract for them, like stars in the sky or the sun or something like that, they won't be able to use their tactile sense in order to help them. Mobility is another hindrance. It is being hindered, and sight allows for early and free movement within the environment. And blind and visually impaired students are affected in this way because they cannot move around as other children move around. Also, interaction with their environment is another way that they can be hindered, because, like I said before, they can't really move around safely, so they have to learn how to move when other children aren't just, they can look and see how they can move around in a room that's crowded with people or something like that. Absence of these experiences and lack of opportunity to imitate other children and adults has severe developmental effects on these children. Academic characteristics. This disability has severe impact on reading and writing because children rely on sight to distinguish fine details in letters and words. And if you can't see letters and words, then you don't understand that sometimes you won't understand that a homophone is being used or something of that nature is being used. Their functioning skills are better than, their function and skills are better than traditional curriculum. They can learn reading and writing comparable to sighted students. They use Braille to read, and by using Braille to read. Their reading rates are slower. Visual impairment specialists teach Braille and can use low vision devices to help students who are blind and visually impaired. Also, these low vision devices can be a magnifier or a CCTV, which is a closed-circuit television that transmits enlarged images onto the TV screen, so it helps the child to learn. Accessing technologies like the Braille system and CCTV will help these children to better learn in classroom. And we'll move on.
So I'm going to be talking about social and emotional characteristics of children who are blind and visually impaired. Learning social skills is really hard for these students, unlike general education students who rely on their sight to learn social cues and behaviors. These students don't have that chance. We learn how to behave in social situations by imitating and watching what's going on around us. Students with visual impairments have to be given direct and systematic information on how to behave. It's hard for them to understand taking turns in conversations. They have a hard time maintaining eye contact. They can't see facial expression, so they may not know when someone is joking about something if they say it in a serious tone. They have a hard time using appropriate voice tone and inflection. They have a rough time expressing feelings and demonstrating appropriate assertiveness. The behavioral characteristics of students who are blind and visually impaired is more, they might be more socially immature and more isolated, and they feel less assertive than children. I know in the school I work in that has blind and visually impaired students, they're more comfortable talking to adults than they are talking to children of their own age. They'd rather have an actual conversation with an adult than a playtime with a child their own age. They also may demonstrate stereotypical behaviors, like rocking or pressing in of their eyes, even though there's no feeling, and these things have to be addressed. And professionals might try eliminating them or reducing these behaviors, and they can do that by putting in like a reward system, so they could, or teaching them alternative techniques, like instead of pressing their eyes, if they need to be doing something with their hands, they can give them like a stress ball, or Play-Doh, clay. They're very like hands-on and tactile, so they want to be doing something with their hands at all time for the most part. But they should be rewarded and learn how to do more positive behaviors. For the perspective of parents and families, there was a study done where they asked parents of blind and visually impaired children what their concerns are, just like in life, and they found that there were a lot of situations that caused stress, including the future, what's going to happen to their child in the future, how they can provide for their child's needs, the finances. It's very expensive to have a child who's blind. There's a lot of technology that can be used, but it can be like $3,000 to $10,000 to make sure that their children are getting the services provided that they should be, early intervention, and throughout the rest of their education, they have to be their advocates. The effects of this disability on their siblings, and again, the social concerns, how their child will be able to develop, social skills. Parents are generally supportive but concerned about their child's social isolation. Like I said, the limited opportunities for children who are blind and visually impaired to perform in extracurricular activities. There's a lot of adaptive physical education things out there that can be used. There's a beeper box and balls with bells in it so that they can hear it. It's coming towards them. A lot of different tools out there that can be used for extracurricular activities and sports-wise, different community activities. And another concern was a general education classroom teachers' lack of knowledge about visual impairments and how they can make accommodations for their students. one tool that can be used to teach children with blind or visually impaired impairments, that coming from experience, I work in a kindergarten class, is a Braille cell. So it teaches children how to read Braille. It's a little block about this big, and it has 6 different holes, and they're given a peg. And if you put the peg in the first hole, that's the letter A. And these children learn by taking the peg and putting it in the hole and learn that that's A, and they can transition it eventually to the paper Braille, where they feel it with their finger and know that that's A. Another good tool to use is pretty much putting Braille around the classroom everywhere. So when the kids get up and do something, they know, that's the calendar and it has the days of the week on it, and it's important to implement Braille in all aspects of their lives when possible. For older kids, they can be using electronic Braille note takers, which is a portable device with a Braille keyboard, and the student enters the information, and it can transfer to a larger computer. It can be reviewed with speech. It has a speech synthesizer, or it can be printed on Braille paper or an ink printer. For students who are visually impaired but not blind, there are different devices that can be used, like domes. You can put it over a regular size print, and it expands it for them, and they move it across the page. Or the teacher can make everything that the general ed kids are doing, they make it large print. It just is bigger, so it's easier for them to see. It's just a simple accommodation. The goal is to give children with disabilities access to literacy and communication in school, home, and community. So that's our input on students who are blind and visually impaired and deaf and hard of hearing. We hope that gives you, the class, some insight, and if you ever have any children who you might suspect are hard of hearing or blind and visually impaired, that you have some tools that can be used to benefit